All right, everyone, we are live, and I am going to give it the usual 2 or so minutes for people to trickle in. I know that people are going to be watching this after the fact, so I'm not going to dilly dally too much. But if you're watching afterwards, just you can skip right through this. I'll say give it about 2 minutes. I'm not going to wait super long, and we are going to get underway. Let the people trickle in. Patrick Kane cherry picking 3 different times, says Ronald. Yeah, that's overtime. Gonna give it about another minute here, and we will begin. That is the nature of these lives, is that people don't really know they're coming sometimes, so we gotta wait just a little bit. All right. Vancouver and Utah are tied. Fabry out in OT is certainly a choice. Yeah, I agree. Robbie Fabry is not my favorite player. I think I've established that around here. Okay, 2 minute mark. Let's get started and talk about this game. So, Ducks lose 5-4 in overtime against the Detroit Red Wings, and this was a very interesting game, is what we'll call it. So, going into the game, Ducks stuck with the same lineup that they have been using, which it was the same exact lineup as last night. No changes, so they went with Olin Zellweger on the back end, and no Pavel Minchikov yet again. John Gibson out with injury, so Oscar Dansk was called up, but you can see that the lines are all the same. They won last night, so why change anything? Now, going into that first period, just a very bizarre start to this game. You had the initial deflection by Marco Kasper, and then the Ducks take a string of penalties that just really set them back. I mean, the just what was it? 5 minutes into this game, you're already down 3-0. The penalty kill is just not stopping anything, allowing quality chances, and it just felt like there was no rhythm to this game. There was really no opportunity for the Ducks to establish themselves at 5-on-5 or to kind of get into the flow of the game, especially in a game where you are just coming off a pretty emotional win against the Bruins back to back. So you're trying to find a way to establish yourself early. And that was not the case. The Detroit Red Wings have been a hotter team since they made the coaching change with Todd McLellan now behind the bench. And the Red Wings power play in particular has been really good, I believe. So just kind of a disaster. Down 3-0, but then I will say that things quickly stabilized for the Ducks, and eventually you see Ryan Strome pick up a goal, a really nice goal for him. Just Troy Terry getting a shot on net. Rebound comes right out to Ryan Strome, who then bangs it home. So all in all, even though the Ducks went down big early, 3-0, to come out of that period where they were not good. To start, to be down just 2 goals, you take that. It's not perfect. It's not good, quote unquote, by any means, but they're not all going to be pretty. And just kind of looking through the penalties in that period, you had Isaac Lundestrom for tripping, Brian Dumoulin for tripping, and then you have Frank Vetrano unsportsmanlike conduct where he just kind of flipped the puck at Albert Johansson after a whistle. So not great. 3 penalties early. The Ducks would end up taking 6 penalties in this game. So kind of a weird little trend. I mean, it's just been 2 games, but the Ducks have been taking a lot of penalties since they've come back from the Four Nations face-off break. And just kind of looking at some of the numbers in that first period, if you look at 5-on-5, which was the majority of the period because the Red Wings power plays were very quick. They scored quickly on those. The Ducks were the better team at 5-on-5. Shot attempts were 19-14. Scoring chances were 6-1. So they were playing fine. I mean, it's weird to say that when you go down that big that early and you come out of a period down 3-1, but I thought that they were solid enough in that period. Now, I think where things kind of took a turn, at least from my own vantage point of the game, was in that second period. So you had JT Compher then score another power play goal for the Red Wings early in that early in that second period. And then from there, this game just really became a bit of a slog for the Ducks. You know, just it felt like everything was difficult. The Red Wings up 4-1 at that point were really putting on the kind of the squeeze on them in the neutral zone. The Red Wings neutral zone structure was really solid. The Ducks were having a really tough time just controlling play, getting through and into the Red Wings zone. It was just really difficult for the Ducks, and it felt like their style is so dependent on skating and intensity that on the tail end of a back-to-back, it's going to be harder to get to your game in that way. But later in the second period, Cutter Gauthier gets on the board. Just kind of a weird goal where Jackson Lacombe shoots it right at him, goes off his elbow and into the net. So not a pretty goal by any means, but he'll take it. There was a lot of drama in that period. I think there was a hit by Trevor Zegras that people didn't like, or I should say that the Red Wings fans didn't like. There was a hit by Ben Chiarot at the end of the second period on Frank Vatrano that was really ugly, that probably should have been more of a penalty, but they didn't call it. It was just not it was just kind of a frantic period, I would say. Just a lot of stuff, a lot of extracurriculars going on, but the actual game itself, just not a whole lot of offense, clean offense for the Ducks. Going to the third period, it was kind of more of the same thing. So to start the third period, the Ducks were on a power play. They got that because of the Ben Chiarot hit in the dying seconds of the second period. They're not able to convert, and you saw there the 5-forward power play gives up a shorthanded breakaway against. So maybe you can blame the fact that it's 5 forwards. Maybe the Ducks will reconsider using 5 forwards, but giving up a shorthanded breakaway is never good, regardless of who's out there. Moving on, though, into that period, again, it was just more of the same. More of the Ducks just looking tired, looking like they just can't move the puck, looking like they can't get to their game. When they do get into the offensive zone, everything is just difficult. Everything is to the outside. And it was looking like one of those games, maybe with 8-ish minutes left, where just the Ducks just didn't have it. Didn't have their fastball, didn't even have their curveball, their changeup, whatever you want to call it. They just didn't have it. But late in the period at 17:44, so right before that, the Ducks pulled their goalie. They pulled Lukas Dostal, who's playing for the second night in a row because Gibson is hurt. I guess he would have played tonight anyway because Gibson started last night. But Olen Zellweger with a point shot. So really nice for him just to kind of see one go into the net, his 5th goal of the season. Leo Carlsson extends his mini point streak there with an assist on that goal. And just kind of a harmless looking point shot from far out. There was some traffic, but it gets through and beats Alex Lyon. And then right after that, I mean, just about a minute later, Cutter Gauthier dashes in, as he usually does, and just kind of chops a backhand right over the arm, the blocker side arm of Alex Lyon, and that would tie the game for the Ducks. And all of a sudden, you've had, we'll call it 55 minutes of pretty so-so play, of just like, yes, the first period was decent at 5-on-5, but the second period was a bit of a nothing burger. I mean, if you look at the stats from that period, shot attempts were 21 to 11 for Detroit in that period, so not great. So again, in a game where things are not really going your way at all, two of your kids, Zellweger and Gauthier, put a couple in the back of the net, and all of a sudden you scratch a point out in the standings because of this game. Then you go to overtime, and the Ducks had some really fantastic looks, especially right before they got scored on, which is how these things tend to go. Trevor Zegras and, well, it was I think Zegras, Fabry, Lacombe get in there on kind of a rush opportunity, and I think Fabry may have had an empty net to shoot at, just can't bury it, and all of a sudden you've got three players deep into the zone, and that's usually trouble. Patrick Kane, a long-time veteran, knows that means get out and get ready for a quick-hitting counterattack pass. He gets that, comes in all alone on Lukas Dostal, scores, and that's the game. I mean, that's all she wrote. So globally, zooming out, looking at this game, this was just not I'm not going to call this a good game by the Ducks. They get outshot 36-28. If you look at the 5-on-5 numbers, if you're just purely looking at shot attempts, it was 48-38 in favor of the Red Wings. But tail end of a back-to-back, you're playing a hot Red Wings team. You take 6 penalties. You really put yourself behind the 8 ball, and you find a way to just get something productive out of this game, get a standings point. So now on the weekend, they pick up 3 out of 4 points, and if you look at the standings, we're pending right now the outcome of the Canucks and Utah game, but right now the Ducks are 6 points out of the final wildcard spot in the Western Conference. So if the Canucks lose in regulation, that will hold, but then that would mean that the Utah Hockey Club will have 1, and so the Ducks would drop behind them back into the 6th spot. So a lot to unpack there. I'll just quickly go over some individual performances from tonight. If you look at the, just from a Duck standpoint, let me see here. There were not a lot of great individual performances. I'll just put it pretty simply. I thought that I almost tweeted at one point before, which I'm glad I didn't, because it was right before the Red Wings came back and tied, or before the Ducks tied it. But I don't think anyone really played that well individually tonight. Troy Terry maybe had his moments, you could say, picks up an assist. Ryan Strome scored, so maybe you'll give them the nod, but I didn't think this was Trevor Zegras' best game. I mean, just looking at total ice time, Zegras played, he actually played 20 minutes, so that's pretty good, but a lot of that was on special teams. But he didn't have his best game, I thought. Jackson Lacombe did pick up an assist, but he also was kind of hit or miss on his breakouts. Radko Gudas was just terrible. I mean, once again, this was a bad Radko Gudas game. Just slow, out of position, taking bad penalties. Not great. I thought McTavish was okay, but just not a very impactful game for him, although he could have scored a couple times. He did get some opportunities, so that definitely changes how you view it. Drew Helleson. So this is something I wanted to touch on, but Drew Helleson was in the lineup again tonight, and Pavel Mintyukov was not for the second game in a row. And I understand that Drew Helleson is right-handed, is a right-shooting defenseman, but he should not be a fixture in the lineup. It's great that he has cracked the NHL. It's great that he's kind of established himself, but tonight you really start to see some of the limitations, especially when he's fatigued. The breakout passing just really kind of takes a nosedive. Some of the defensive work is not as sharp. He's a fine player. He's a good player. It's just he doesn't need to be playing every single game. I think Pavel Mintyukov, you just have to get him back into the lineup because Helleson is just not. He doesn't project as a guy who's going to be in the lineup every night. Maybe he will. Maybe he'll become a true third pairing defenseman in the NHL who can play every night. But usually there's going to be at least one defenseman that sits out on a third pairing. So anyway, Cutter Gauthier, I mean, 2 goals. If you want to talk about individual performances, I guess you got to give him a little bit of a stick tap there. I mean, sure, one of the goals was off his elbow, but a really nice shot on the tying goal. So we'll give him that. Leo Carlson, I thought, was better tonight, especially he had one sequence below the goal line. I think it was in the second period where he was just kind of changing directions, stopping on a dime, shifting back and forth, trying to create something. And that's really what you want to see from Leo Carlson. And then outside of that, I mean, we've covered basically the entire team, but just nobody really stuck out that much tonight. And Ross Johnston, by the way, playing 749 tonight. So that's great to see. I didn't think Dostal had his best game, but also by the same token, he was put in some really difficult spots, especially because he had to play last night. A lot of power play opportunities against, so I'm not really too worried about his game. But watching some of the goals over the weekend, the San Diego goals, I think, man, Sam Colangelo just should be on this team over a guy like Ross Johnston. Just has to be. But that is my recap for the game. So if anyone has any questions, throw them into the chat right now. We've got about 5-ish minutes left of this. I will just read through the chat here. But if you've got something you want me to touch on that I haven't talked about yet, just throw it into the chat. Let's see. Marc-Andre asks, can we even trade Fabry? I think somebody will want him. I don't know if the Ducks will want to trade him because they seem to think he's a key part of the third line. Marc-Andre says, Luneau getting some ice instead of Helleson could be good. I think Luneau's good in the AHL right now. That's where he needs to be. He needs to be kind of just, honing his craft a little bit down there. I don't think that the NHL is where he should be right now. Ronald said, trade Fabry. We have Passagov, Colangelo, Nestorenko, and Sidorov playing very well in the AHL. They're all playing very well. I think that that's where, with the exception of Colangelo, I think that that's where they all should be right now, though. The AHL is a good spot for them. So I would be a little careful with calling those guys up too soon. Deuce says Minchikov scratched constantly is managerial incompetence. I agree. I couldn't have said it any better. Ronald says Helleson has been bad since those first 10 games of the call-up. I don't think he's been necessarily bad, but you can just tell that he's a bit limited, and he just isn't someone who should be playing every single game. So, let's see. Avoid says Leo's looked so much more confident since that break. Yeah, he's played really well, and he's also, I would say he's been a little bit more calculated in his passing too, which is great on those entries. He's a little bit less tunnel vision-y, which is what you want to see. I've certainly been critical of him in that regard. Let's see. Harrison asks, do you think the Ducks select Radim Murtka, RHD, with their first-round pick? I think the Ducks are selecting a forward. It's just, I could be wrong about that, and maybe they kind of look at it and say, well, Gudas and Trouba aren't going to be here forever, but Jacob Trouba is not that old. He's going to be here for a while. You've got Helleson on the right side. You've got Tristan Luneau. We know the lefties are stacked up. So unless the Ducks get the first overall pick and select Matthew Schaefer, I just don't think they're drafting a defenseman. Maddie asks, are we worried about a lack of immediately playable goalie depth? Dansk or Klang backing up makes me so nervous. That is a great point. So I'm going to pull up the AHL here website to show you all, but the stats for the Ducks AHL goalies this season are not great. So if you look at let's see, San Diego goals. So Calle Klang this season for the goals has a .894 save percentage, 3.22 goals against average, and Oscar Dansk has an .886. So yeah, the organizational goalie depth is not great. That being said, the goals really did struggle to start the season, and so you can say maybe that some of those stats are affected by the team in front of them. Oscar Dansk has been okay in the past, and I think in an absolute pinch you can probably do worse, but it's that is a good point. The lack of goalie depth is a bit problematic, and at some point I'm assuming John Gibson's going to be traded, maybe not this season, but maybe that's where you go and get some goalie depth. We'll see. And Maddie does bring up that when Sukanek was tearing it up last season, it seemed fine, but yikes. That is true. Sukanek being hurt does kind of make all of this look a lot worse than it actually is. Of course, that injury he suffered, I think was a knee injury. I mean, that's keeping him out for a while, so not sure how much you can count on him. Ronald asks, what are your thoughts on the 5-man power play unit? Keep it or go back to 4F1D? I think you go 5. You keep it with the 5-man forwards, the 5-forward power play unit. I think that they've looked good. Tonight wasn't their best night, but you got to give them some runway. You got to give them 5 to 10 games to really kind of get a feel for it. Mighty Flow Hockey is saying that Sukanek had a second knee surgery. Yeah, that's right. I think I did see that. So, not good. Ronald asks, if Dumoulin gets traded, who do you call up to be the 7th D? Good question. Who would I call up? I think you would probably call up Luneau, maybe Tyson Hines. I think Luneau just needs to be in the AHL right now. So maybe Tyson Hines gets a look. Someone that you can just kind of scratch, basically. I'd rather have Luneau playing, whereas Tyson Hines, I don't feel it's bad calling him up and playing him every now and again. Okay, we have exceeded the 20-minute mark. So unless anyone has any last-second question or topic, I'm going to get out of here. This was fun. We'll see if we do this again. Not a victory stream. With the stream is now 1. I was gonna say 1-1. The stream is now 1-0-1. So that's not terrible. See if we can get a little score update here. Predictions against the Sabres. Are the Ducks playing the Sabres? Am I going crazy? Let's see. So Vancouver, Utah is still tied. Calgary is leading San Jose, so the Ducks fans will want a Calgary regulation loss there, since Calgary is ahead in the standings. Yes, the Ducks do play the Sabres on Tuesday. I'll say the Ducks win that game. The Sabres are not that good. I think the Ducks are playing a little bit better of late. They're going to get a day off to rest and recover. So let's go with the Ducks win. And then that sets up for a massive game on Thursday against the Canucks. I mean, that is a must win. That is practically a playoff game for this team. But you have to pick up points still on the way there. So they need a win or points against Buffalo. And then, Thursday is for all the marbles. Because if you lose against the Canucks on Thursday, it's not a death knell, but it certainly makes things a lot more complicated to get into the playoffs. Buffalo preview. Well, so we're going to be doing a regular podcast tomorrow. So we're going to be at our regular time, 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on here on YouTube and Twitch. So we'll talk more about it there. Let's see. Anything else that people said? If Pettersson gets traded this offseason, would you still want him? Yes, Elias Pettersson is great. Does Beckett Seneca join the Ducks next year? I do think he gets games with the Ducks next year. I don't know if he spends the whole season, though. Are you doing these post-game pods every game now? No. Just every now and again when I have time. Maybe once or twice a week. We'll see. Very vibes-based, but it's not going to be every game. But thanks to everyone who tuned in. This was really fun. And we will talk to you tomorrow night for the regular version of Crash the Pond, where it won't just be me talking for 20 minutes straight. Thanks for watching.